Minutes after the hour, I am Tony Trupiano. Pleasure to be with you this morning. My thanks again to Susan Demas for being with us in the last half hour. Let's move on to our next guest. I've been very much looking forward, having read his book over the holiday weekend. I found it beyond fascinating. Joining us now is author Jonathan Simon. Jonathan is author of the book I just mentioned, Code Red, Computerized Election Theft and the New American Century. He is also the co-founder and currently executive director of the Election Defense Alliance, a nonprofit organization founded in 2006 to restore observable vote counting and electoral integrity as the foundation of American democracy. Gee, there's a thought, huh? Dr. Simon's expertise in polling and statistical analysis derives from his former employment as a political survey research analyst in Washington, D.C. He has also authored, both individually and in collaboration, numerous papers related to various aspects of election integrity, and he joins us this morning on The Voice of the People. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, John. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Tony. Good to be with you.
Fascinating read. I have to tell you, once I got started, it was certainly a page-turner for those of us that care about election integrity. There were lots of gold mines in Code Red, I'll tell you that for sure. But let's take you back to 2001, and I think it's fairly obvious why you got involved with this issue, but explain to the audience how it is that you ended up where you're at, because you are considered one of the consummate experts on election integrity.
Well, Tony, in a way, it's not that obvious. I spent a good part of my adult life, I'm in my late 50s now, but, pretty much politically snoozing. The Clinton presidency went by, there was Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, and who could tell the difference, and I was very turned off from politics, particularly national politics, really didn't pay much attention. And then came along the 2000 election, and specifically, the theft of the 2000 election, the thuggery that was employed, the backhandedness, the collaboration of the media, the collaboration of the U.S. Supreme Court, and in particular, protesting at the inauguration of Bush, the first inauguration. There were pretty good at estimating crowds, because I'm a fairly high-level soccer official, and I see, big stadiums, and there were at least 50,000 of us down there, and crowd control was superb, and we were shunted off and kept away from the parade route and dispersed all around Washington, and I suspect there were closer to 100,000, actually, because I just saw 50,000 in the one staging area of DuPont Circle. And then when I got home, I read in the Times and all the various papers of record that there were a few protesters. And I realized that we were in for a pretty rough ride, because not only the government but the media, there was a very, very strong push to keep things under wraps and keep things covered and keep the populists at the gates. And I saw, somewhat the handwriting on the wall. 2002 election, of course, after 9/11, things were very stirred up. And in that election, for the first time, the exit polls were completely withheld from the public. And the reason they were withheld is that they were so far off. There was such a great, what we call red shift, which is votes coming out to the right of the polls, whether it's pre-election polls or exit polls, all the baseline measures, was so great in that election that withheld the polls altogether. And that was a wake-up call. That was a big, big red flag, especially in conjunction with some of the bizarre electoral results that happened in 2002. And that was, not coincidentally, just the beginning of the computerized voting age, when the computers had begun to proliferate, courtesy of the Help America Vote Act, which ironically was a response to the hanging chads, and was exploited brilliantly to computerize American elections without really any serious thought being given to the dangers that would entail. And that was the start of it. I felt going into 2004 that we were in trouble. I thought it would be child's play to raise $2 or $3 million to set up burglar alarm system, an exit poll-based burglar alarm system run independently, and we fell about, $2,995,000 short of $3 million. It turned out that was another wake-up call, recognizing how passive and unengaged the media was and the public was about this critical issue. Nobody seemed to care. 2004 election, sat up on election night, downloaded these exit polls, which became, known as the Simon data, because nobody else had seen fit to sit up and download these unadjusted exit polls. By 4 in the morning, I had a back of the envelope calculation that showed very clear patterns of election rigging in battleground states like Ohio, and no idea who to send it to. And eventually it was put out on the internet a couple of days later by someone in New Zealand, of all places. And that was the start of the modern election integrity movement, or I don't know if you can even call it a movement, but the election integrity efforts that have been ongoing ever since, and unfortunately have not been very successful. We're in worse shape now than we have been at any point.
Well, when we take a look at this issue, and I think we should define what election integrity means, so, and I don't mean any disrespect to the audience, but I think that sometimes there's a misconception about what that means.
Absolutely. Well, election integrity means a lot. It means an election that you can rely on as having been honest, and that begins, in at least in our view, with the vote count itself. If that's the bedrock protocol, if you don't have a reliable vote count, if you don't have an observable vote count, then it's very hard to put any weight at all on the electoral results. There's basically no legitimacy where votes are counted behind a curtain in secret. Other aspects of election integrity, of course, involve things like campaign finance, voter suppression, gerrymandering. There are all sorts of ways to gain political advantage. But we look at specifically the issue of vote counting, how your vote, my vote, everybody's vote are being tallied, and how reliable that process is, how subject it is to manipulation and interference and subversion, as being the fundamental aspect of election integrity, without which you basically have nothing. And I like to characterize it as a hole in the bucket, because there are a lot of very well-motivated and well-intentioned groups out there that are concerned with other aspects of our elections. For instance, Elizabeth Drew just wrote a major review, a major column in the New York Review of Books that came out in May, in which she goes over in gory detail pretty much everything. Gerrymandering, voter suppression, turnout issues, lies on the campaign trail, big money, everything. But not a word about the counting process. So if you try to improve all those things, and there are many people out there that are, working, and organizations that are working to improve those things, but at the bottom, you don't have an observable vote count, and you allow corporations, partisan corporations, to program these memory cards and program these computers in the pitch dark of cyberspace with no access whatsoever to that code or to those memory cards, no public inspection. You're basically you're filling a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. And I think the results correlate with that. The results are that we've had a mysterious and inexplicable veer to the right of American politics since the computers went in. And that has continued. It's escaped full notice to some extent because the focus of Americans is so strongly, just like it's on the Super Bowl in football, it's on presidential elections. And the real coup here has been on the infrastructural level, state legislatures, the U.S. House, low on the ballot, down ballot elections, low scrutiny elections that are almost riskless, without risk, to steal because there are no forensics possible, there are no baselines, and that's where the takeover has occurred, and it is a much more enduring one than the occupant of the White House. As a matter of fact, it's going to be very, very difficult to undo in this generation, within our lifetimes.
Well, that's not encouraging news. My guest again is Jonathan Simon. He's author of the book Code Red, Computerized Election Theft in the New American Century. Before I get to my first caller, John, I do have a link to the website, and I do want to make sure that before we get out of here, we mention the Kickstarter campaign because I think that's important. Can people buy the book, obviously, through the website? Can they get it at Amazon as well?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the Kickstarter campaign is done, or at least that particular Kickstarter campaign is done, and we were successful in raising our goal, so we have, a modest pot of funds. Could use more, but to advertise Code Red, and that's the key. It's a self-published book, and the idea is to get it read. The website is www.codered2014.com. And it is available on Amazon. You just search Code Red Simon, and it comes right up. And, the idea is to bring the issue of observable vote counting and the perils of computerized and unobservable vote counting into the public discourse. We need to build a foundation. We've been working at this for, a better part of 15 years. And what we've realized is the system is unresponsive. The media is unresponsive. The political system is certainly unresponsive. This has to come from the people. And in order for that to happen, there has to be a big, big growth in awareness of what the problems are, what the solutions would be, what the action steps will look like to turn this around and get to the point where we count our votes either by hand or have the kind, at least, of robust and well-executed and scrupulous audits where we can say that the vote count is observable. It's not happening in secret behind a curtain. And, along those lines, one of the first questions we'll ask to somebody who is not, who hasn't been initiated into this is, if you were holding an election, whether it was for a school board or a union chief or whatever it was, local, national, whatever, and the form of the election was you filled out your ballot and handed it to a man who was dressed in a magician's costume, who then took the ballots behind a curtain, came out a half hour later, said, I counted them, I shredded them, and here's who won. Would you trust that election? And, pretty much everybody says, of course not. What do you think, I'm crazy? And then our follow-up to that is there is no difference between that election and the way our votes are counted in 98% of the counties in America. They are all man-behind-the-curtain, secret vote counting elections. And we just have no basis for trust in that system. It has to be changed going forward. Obviously, we've produced a lot of forensic evidence, and that's in Code Red, of course, that these results have been suspect, that they are red flags. But independent of, let's say you threw out all the forensic evidence, all the show that this actually had an impact, you'd still be left with, is an unobservable vote counting system, a computerized system for all its convenience, for all the joys of getting your results by 10 p.m. so you can go to bed knowing who the government and the president is. Is that worth having a system that cannot be observed and cannot be trusted, where the corporations are counting your votes for you, and certainly absolutely free to substitute a private agenda for the public trust? And that's what American democracy is now founded on and based on, and it's hard to call it a democracy in light of that.
Absolutely. All right, John, we're going to go to the phones and welcome Bruce to the program. Bruce, as always, appreciate the call. What's on your mind today?
Well, gosh, Jonathan, you just hit about all of the points I wanted to cover, but I wanted to ask you a couple things. One is, are you aware of who owns Dominion voting systems? That's an issue in Michigan, because I don't know if you're aware, but Michigan right now, we use scanners in Michigan, and they've reached the end of their useful life. We're now in the process, apparently, at the state level of replacing them across the state. And so apparently there's no money to replace them. And MIRA, which I'm a member of the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, we are very much interested in having hand-counted paper ballots. I don't know if you saw recently the vote in Ireland on gay marriage. I watched the segment on MSNBC, and the entire election was they were paper ballots. They were counted by hand, and there's obviously an election that you can count on the results. So what can we do to make what are you doing, I guess, besides writing the book, and how can we make our politicians aware of the problem that we have with just the fact of we can't count our votes accurately in the United States, and specifically in Michigan?
Bruce, boy, that's a lot of territory. I thought I could just get away with writing the book and then go into retirement, but I can't. There's more to be done.
Sorry, Jonathan, not going to happen. Yeah, not going to happen.
You raise some really important issues because, first of all, not only in Michigan, but in many places around the country, the equipment is hitting obsolescence, and so the choice, once again, is upon us about what we're going to do and what we're going to replace it with. Corporations like Dominion, I mean, you can go on their website. Good luck finding out who actually owns them. They're slick websites, but they're highly secretive. They don't tell you much. I mean, I would just go by the name has always been a red flag to me. Dominion voting, really, that almost seems too obvious in a way. So you have Dominion, and you have what's left of VS&S, and what was left of Diebold Premier, and you have Sequoia, and you have Hart, and you have Skytle, and they're all tied into right-wing operatives, people that got their start, the Urosevich brothers, in the far right wing, and then they took major fortunes, Todd and Bob Urosevich, and decided to go into voting machines when slot machines or soda machines would have been a hell of a lot more lucrative. So it's quite a fascinating and a book all to itself about this industry. And of course, they make it very difficult to know what you're getting and what you're choosing. They're the ones who wind up doing the programming. The election administrators are most often don't have the technical chops, and they're in the dark. So it's a very, very dangerous system. And then the other thing you mentioned is, of course, there isn't the money, because this is American democracy. And, yes, we're spending $4 billion a week to bring democracy to Iraq and Afghanistan and various places around the world. $4 billion, 1 week worth of Iraq and Afghanistan would buy us full equipment for a generation here in America. It would either provide for full audits or full hand-counted paper ballots at a working wage. I personally believe we should be willing to volunteer that time to count ballots. We owe certain duties to our democracy if we want to uphold it. But if it was volunteer or paid, there is plenty of money. It's just that it's going into the military budget, and it's going abroad in the cause of nation building, and then your local election administrator is down to duct tape and safety pins to fix their equipment. This is a revolting perversion of priorities, and along the lines of revolting perversions of priorities, you have something that's really important that just came up in this country, which is the amount of air pressure in our footballs. This has a month worth of anchors of major networks being very concerned and talking about it. We are very concerned about the air pressure in our footballs because that matters. That gets investigated. Footballs get impounded. Text messages get read and made part of a comprehensive report because football matters. But our electoral system and who is elected and how that election takes place, what's on those memory cards, you cannot get access to any of that equipment. It belongs to Dominion. It's completely corporate property. It's utterly protected from any form of investigation, inspection, or intrusion. So this is the America that somehow or other, collectively, we have chosen and we have chosen to accept. And that is a national tragedy.
All right, let me pose this question, and I'll buy into the premise that since computerized tabulating, we have seen a radical move to the right in this country. But with that said, there has to be political will to change this, which means where are the Democrats on this? They're not making any noise either.
Yes, there's an excellent question, and I think in Code Red I devote some quite a bit of copy to that, and I'll just quote myself: a good way to liven up any gathering of understandably morose election integrity activists would be to ask everyone's view on why the Democrats have consistently acquiesced in highly suspect electoral defeats and been so unwilling to look into the role of computerized vote counting in the rightward veer of American politics. And then I go on to, give 5 explanations. There's a variety of reasons. I mean, one is that the Democrats really aren't the victim here. The public, the people, are the victim. The Democrats are ensconced in power, whether they're the minority or the majority. They get their elections, they get paid. Certainly the politicians who are successfully in office, well, the system worked for them. If you're a Democrat and you're a senator or you're a House member or you're a state legislature, you got elected, case closed. If you happen to lose, the pressure on losing candidates to concede that night, so everybody can go to bed, secure in the knowledge of who's going to be in office, is incredibly strong. I mean, remember, Al Gore was under tremendous pressure to concede, and he had actually won the popular vote in this country, and he was still, considered to be holding up progress. So fighting it from an individual candidate standpoint can be a form of political suicide. The other thing is the Democrats are obsessed with turnout. They think they can defeat anything by getting more voters to turn out, and that's where I go back to the hole in the bucket problem. Yeah, you're putting more voters into the voting booth, and their votes are getting shifted or not counted. In the long run, you're going to lose. I mean, there are situations where you can swamp a rig with turnout. Let's bear in mind that there's a smell test for rigs, and if somebody's going to win an election by 25%, it's very unlikely that anybody is going to take the risk. There's an algorithm, a risk-reward algorithm, and you're not going to take the risk to shift 25% of the votes. That would probably get the attention of the New York Times, although not necessarily, but it would be a high-risk proposition. So Democrats think, if we talk about election theft and the insecurity of the election system, it's going to discourage a big part of their constituency, all who already, being relatively marginal in society, have their doubts about the system, that they won't vote. And to some extent, that's true. They'll stay home. What's the point of voting? They don't count my vote. This comes down often to a racial issue as well, where immigrants and African Americans have really relatively low basis for trusting the system already. So they're afraid. Democrats are afraid to add this in, so there are a bunch of different reasons, and among them, and the one that I hold for last in my explanation in Code Red is what I call a religion, and it's a secular religion. It's a religion that says, this could never happen here. This is America. This is the beacon of democracy. Our national self-esteem depends on believing that we do things right, that we are the city on the hill, that we are exceptional, that we are not subject to the, vulnerabilities to scandal that you'd see in the third world, that you'd see now in FIFA, that we saw in the Tour de France, that we see in all these other activities, Wall Street, Bernie Madoff, the just win, baby ethic. Just win, 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 win. That's it. Well, we believe that America, founded by these wonderful founding fathers with this wonderful Constitution, and that is true in most respects, is immune to all this. And the Democrats believe that. They believe that it could never happen here. And when you add that to all the other reasons, you wind up with a very supine party and candidates and you can throw the mainstream media in, and quite tragically, you can throw the progressive media in as well, because much of the progressive media won't touch this with a 10-foot pole.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. So what I'm going to suggest, and I'll send you an email after the show, let's try to get you on either next week or the week after. I have a list of questions longer than my arm, and this is a conversation worthy of extending. I just don't have time today to do that. But Jonathan Simon, you have really done something exceptional with this book, Code Red. Again, I have linked to it on the Facebook page, so I want to encourage people to go there and click through. I do want to encourage you to pick up a copy, and you'll let us know when the next crowdsourcing campaign starts so that we can promote that for you as well. But I would like to have you back very, very soon so we can continue this discussion.
Tony, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and it deserves all the airtime that it can get. It's quite central to our future as a country and to some extent as a planet, and I appreciate that you get that, and I would be more than happy to return and go through